Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give everyone time to join us because we know that some of the meetings are overlapping today, and that's okay. But come on in, join us, and we'll get started shortly. Okay, well, good afternoon and welcome. I know people are checking in, coming into the chat. I was going to say the classroom, but no, this is the training. So, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's self assessment training. So, we're going to just walk through what the self assessment is, what it looks like, and why does it matter, and what your voice is, and how does it play a big role in this process, and how we're going to strengthen your children and families. So the process is about not about finding fault. So we're not pointing fingers, but we are learning. We are going to reflect and improve your self assessment progress. So by the end of the training, hopefully you'll have a clear understanding of how the self assessment connects to your program quality and the planning process. So today you'll hear from myself, Martise Brooks, the supervisor of communications and planning, as well as our senior director, Angel, as well as our assistant director, Craig Zimke, and Berenice, our support service coordinator. And next slide.
So one of the things that I want to do, Angel Jones Dotson, the senior director here, is I want to thank you for coming to this self-assessment training. I also want to do a little housekeeping for the attendees of this training. Can I just please ask that everybody stay muted till the end? And at the end, I'm sure Zimke will open it up for if you have questions or concerns or things like that pertaining to your agency. And so I am talking also so that you can see my slide because it's actually the only slide that I'm presenting. Um, and I just want to go over it a little bit. So when you do your self-assessment, we usually have input from a community assessment. Um, that goes into your self-assessment because the community assessment will align with what's happening in the neighborhood, what's happening with the agencies around you, things like that. And so the first one at the top in green where it says every 5 years, this will go in succession with the quinquennial report that DFSS actually gives the agency so that it can help them in that fifth year with their self-assessment. And so this is basically the cycle for you to conduct and update the things. You have to create an action plan and budget that reflects your goals, implement an action plan. Then you have to analyze it and see if the things that you are implementing are any good or is there anything that you need to tweak. And then you want to evaluate it and you want to start all over again every year. Hence, that's why this is the yearly cycle planning. Um, Zimke next.
Good afternoon. So what you're looking at here is kind of a flow chart of the whole overarching self-assessment process. The self-assessment happens in phases. So first we plan the process for the year and then gather and review data. And that's things like enrollment data, PIR outcomes, the TS Gold outcomes. So then next we discuss the findings and identify strengths and challenges, and finally develop recommendations for planning for the next year. Each phase builds on the previous one, and all the phases require input from different perspectives, including hopefully parents, staff, and partner organizations. Next slide. So here we're outlining the initial steps for developing the self-assessment process. This includes creating a data plan, a draft plan, and identifying the data that we're going to review. Examples of the preliminary data include program goals, monitoring data, PIR data, professional development information, child outcomes, parent and family engagement data. This information gives us a full picture of how the program is functioning. This slide focuses on how we use data and tools. As a group, we're going to discuss and prioritize ideas for areas for deeper review and request any additional data that we might need. Agencies will also use the required self-assessment tools, including the report and survey that's going to be due by April 15th, 2026. At this stage, agencies also develop their self-assessment plan and timeline and seek approval from the policy council and governing body. And because I know someone is going to ask, and will explain in a bit, yes, that April 15th date is much earlier than it has been in previous years. And yes, there's a reason for that. Next slide. So the self-assessment committee should include a diverse group of voices. We want to have parents involved, should include agency staff and community partners, as well as DFSS staff. Once members are identified, agencies orient them by sharing their self-assessment plan and all of the relevant data with the committee members. Subgroups can be formed to focus on specific content areas, ensuring that the process is thoughtful, inclusive, and manageable for participants. Next slide. So, for some key steps, at this stage, committees and subgroups are going to review and analyze the data, assess progress towards goals, and engage in meaningful discussions. Members should be working on identifying strengths as well as challenges and system level issues. The goal is not just to name problems, but kind of understand the root causes and begin developing practical, actionable recommendations to resolve any issues that have been identified. Next slide. So at this point, we're going to be consolidating the recommendations. Once the subgroup discussions are complete, recommendations need to be gathered together and prioritized. These recommendations help shape the action plans and guide future program planning. Feedback on the self-assessment process itself is also gathered so that we can improve how this work is done in future years. And big takeaway from this, yeah, I just want to make sure everyone is clear about if you've identified issues and recommendations, then when you're developing your program goals for next year, it shouldn't be completely disconnected. That's why we talk about this as part of the overall planning process. So when you have issues that are clearly defined, identifying them should be, or resolving them should be integral to their setup for your future goals. Next slide.
Okay, it's back to me. Thank you, Craig. So now it's time to do the work. prepare your report. So after you've compiled all your data, you have your findings and your recommendations, you should be putting this information into a final self-assessment report. So this does include the Survey Monkey information that you share with DFSS. So this report should be reviewed and approved by your policy council. Try not to leave the policy council out because this is your governing body before submitting it to Children's Services. And the deadline, again, April 15th. Again, I know it's definitely earlier than we've had in the past, but we have to keep pushing this. That's why we're having this early on training now in the month of January versus waiting until later. But April 15th is the actual due date. I'm not sure if there will be room for late submissions because of other things that are taking place within DFSS. Next slide.
Hi, are you able to hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. So we are now in the post phase of the self-assessment. And so within this phase, once your report is submitted, the work still continues. Agencies will share their findings with staff and stakeholders, of course. They'll also gather feedback regarding that process that they just finalized, and that will inform the following year. Of course, they'll also share, or I'm sorry, they'll also use the recommendations that they gathered from the self-assessment to either adjust or confirm their goals and action plans. And so this really just ensures that the self-assessment leads to meaningful, continuous improvement across all programs. And once again, we just want to remind folks that the deadline is April 15th. It's a Wednesday. Um, you'll need to go ahead and submit, just in like in prior years, two two items, one being a report and a survey that you'll need to submit via SurveyMonkey. We'll go ahead and release those materials in the next CSD update, as well as with this recording. So either uh, tomorrow um, or Friday. And so I also want to put in the chat this link from Head Start regarding the self-assessment. So folks can also use that as a tool or resource if they need just more detailed information, but also feel free to contact me. I will go ahead and put my email in the chat. In addition, the report instructions has my email as well. So folks can always reach out to me with any questions. Okay, so I've put my email in the chat. And that's really our final or the end of our presentation. But if folks have any questions, right now would be a great time to unmute or enter them in the chat.
Is the report the same report from previous years?
So there's definitely a lot of the same. Oh, the report, pretty much, yes, I would say it's the only thing that changes are the years. So it's very similar. The survey also is very similar. There's a few questions that have been new questions, and some that have been reworded, and so they've been updated.
Are there any other questions? But thank you, Claudia, for that question.
I'd like to just say a word about the accelerated timeline, just so everyone understands the overall situation that we're in. Um, while this self assessment covers all of the programs that are funded by DFSS, It is a requirement of our federal funding, and so it is part of our annual Head Start, early Head Start grant cycle. And normally under that cycle, all of our things, our annual reports, self-assessment, so on, would be due at the end of the summer. But because our 5-year grant period has ended and we're submitting a new federal grant, our current funding actually goes through the end of June. And by that point, we will have a different funding structure of some kind after resubmitting the competitive grant and so on. So all of this needs to be into the feds by that point. So we're not, the reason we're backing up to dates to April is, and are saying that we're not sure we can accommodate like extensions or late requests, is we have an earlier deadline to get everything into the Office of Head Start, which we will meet. Um, so any information that we don't have by that point, we can't include because we can't delay and submit our information late because we couldn't collect it. So that's why everything is backed up.
Thank you, Craig. Anyone else? Any questions? I know it seemed like that went much quicker than HSAC did, but we are here for any questions or concerns you may have about the process. No? So please look out in the CSD update for future planning dates for the breakout groups. And we really appreciate you joining us today in this little, I don't know what happened this morning. Winter Wonderland happened, who knows, but you survived, and we thank you for joining us this morning or this afternoon. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.